So talking about the table of grace and how God has invited us there, we mentioned 2 Samuel 9, how David invited this guy who was unfit for his table, and yet he was sitting there, who was undeserving to sit at his table, and yet he was sitting there. And with that, David was saying a very important point. He was making a very important point. He was saying, sitting at my table is not about deserving or about being fit for it. It's about my invitation and my grace inviting him. And this is how God ministers to us. He invites us to this table of grace, unfit, unmeriting, and yet we have a place there. And God bless you with this morning thought. I trust it does, and just go with me on this, please. So this is in 2 Samuel 9. And the question is, how does then truth connect with this? And some people would say, oh, you're elevating the ministry, you're elevating grace. So that means you're excluding truth, I'm sure. So that means you're excluding holiness, I'm sure. So that means you're not talking about judgments. And this is not true. It doesn't have to be true. Because like truth and grace, they are two sides of the same coin, or rather, they are two truths about the same person of God. And this is very important for us, yeah. We are sitting at the table of grace. This is where God has invited us. We fellowship with Him in grace. This is how it functions. The only way it functions. But yet there are painful realities like hell. And the same God who is the God of grace, yes, there is hell. And yes, there are judgments, and yes, there is truth, and yes, there is holiness and sanctification, and we're not diminishing those things. But here is the, how are then those reconciled? And one of the answers to that is you need to come to Bible school and listen to some in-depth teaching on that, and then you will see how those are reconciled. But right now we're not going to go into that. But the point is, the very simple point is, we're sitting at the table of grace, and there is a dish on the table called truth. And there is a dish on the table called sanctification and holiness and judgment. And there are all these dishes, and eating from the table of grace, you can receive these things. But let's see, for example, if we sat at another table, how could we then receive truth? Let's say we're sitting at a table of corruption. How could we then receive truth? That would be a corrupted truth, right? Paul speaks about this in 1 Corinthians 5:8. Therefore, let us keep the feast. God has given us a feast, a new table, but not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And his point is that we are invited into a new life, and let us not live with the old. How could I sit at the table of corruption and receive truth from there? The table of grace is not a table of corruption. It is a pure place. Or we could say some other tables, but the point is that if I'm sitting at the table of grace, if I'm fellowshipping with God in grace, through grace, then I can receive truth. I can internalize truth, actually, from there. And that's the only place where I can actually take it in. Because if I sat at the table of comparison, then I would receive truth, and I would immediately receive it for someone else, and I would measure myself to them by that truth right away. That's the only thing I would use it for. I would never be able to internalize it. If I'm sitting at a table of judgment, then the truth coming at me from that table is actually a weapon directed at me, and I would be very quick to turn it against someone like you, and I would say, oh, the truth is, and this is how it works, and it wouldn't be something that I'm receiving and something that I'm edified by. And of course I could never edify you with that either. Or if it would be the table of selfishness, then the quote unquote truth coming to me from that table would be, I would either have to be suspicious of it, or it would be misleading me, it would be manipulating me into something. That would not be truth it would not be truth at all. But the point is, and I hope I was able to express it, is that if I'm receiving truth from, through grace, in grace, I am receiving truth. And that's how God is ministering to me with truth, with sanctification, about holiness, about heaven and hell, about the judgments. Then actually I can internalize those. things, and I can be edified by them, and I am ministered to by them, and then I can minister on with them, and I can minister with them in love, and help others and edify and build people up. And this is the only place, this is the only table where that can happen. Yeah, I know, a lot to chew on. God bless your day, and chew on that with the Lord.